Welcome to another in our series of Kehillat Israel podcasts. This is a recording of Rabbi Amy Bernstein's weekly Friday morning Torah study.
We're in Parshat Vayeshev. We're in the very beginning of the story of Joseph. We're only going to do this chapter 27. Just to look at how some scholars analyze these texts. We're going to go small chunks by small chunks rather than do the chunk and unpack it afterward. We're going to read through this chapter the way folks do who are really analyzing the ideas of development that we've been discussing. So we've been talking about the development of identities of the patriarchs. It's very interesting for me to look at it from that lens. I never have really done that before. So both Zornberg and Leon Kass do that. And so now we're at Joseph. So now we're at the next stage. We've just talked last week and the week before about Yaakov's development as the patriarch. And we have the scene, of course, where he wrestles with an Ish. Later, it's a Malach or some kind of experience of El, of God. And he earns, right, his place in the family that's going to pass down the covenant. What I never really saw before in the Joseph story is how we're going to go the opposite of what happened to, not the opposite, but like starting at the end of Yaakov earning his blessing and wrestling all night and saying, I'm not hiding, I'm not being a trickster, none of that anymore. He earns the blessing, he earns his right to the patriarchate. Now let's see what happens if we read it in that light of this identity development of the head of this covenantal clan, this covenantal family, this restart that God is experimenting with. Look how interesting the Joseph story becomes. Because we know it's so much, it's like, blah, boring, whatever. But if we read it this way, look how interesting it becomes. All right. Vayeshev Yaakov be'eretz megurei aviv be'eretz Canaan. So Jacob was settled in the land where his father had sojourned, the land of Canaan. That seems pretty straightforward, doesn't it? Not if you're reading this as character and identity development, turns out. Why? Let's look. One of the things that we read right away is that it opens Vayeshev Yaakov and Jacob settled. Well, Leon Kass argues that this signals a desire for rest and permanence that is premature. The patriarchs, he writes, do not get to settle. Their destinies are formed through tests, transformations, and disruption. Thus, the narrative immediately throws the household into turmoil, exposing unresolved tensions in Jacob's family system. This tension sets the stage for moral education. Vayeshev teaches that comfort without character collapses. Okay, wait a minute. So, already, Vayeshev Yaakov and Yaakov settled is already big warning. No, we're told. Don't read. That's some geographical GPS. He settled in the land of Canaan, so we know where he is. No, this is a direct challenge to what has to happen for real development. That there's stuff Yaakov hasn't worked out in his family, and we're going to see the repercussions of that now. Right? There's stuff Jacob hasn't addressed. Not only that, he's going to go the opposite of addressing the favoritism that happened in his family that caused so much pain. And he tries to settle down and not address all that and just ignore it and be happy and relax and play golf. Doesn't work. Doesn't work. And now we're going to see just how much it doesn't work to try and just settle down and ignore, right? The next stage of development that should have been Yaakov's, that wasn't, and because it wasn't, we're going to get this whole incredible story. Okay. So let's go on. This then is the line of Jacob. At 17 years of age, Joseph tended the flocks with his brother as a helper to the sons of his father's wives, Bilhah and Zilpah. And Joseph brought bad reports of them to their father, right? So we're not told why. We're not told what they are. We're just told he brings ra'ah, like stuff that's ra'ah. So he's bringing bad reports to his father about his brothers, right? Now Israel, now he's called Israel, not Yaakov. He's called Yisrael. Loved Yosef best of all of his children because he was the child of his old age, and he made him an ornamented tunic. And when his brothers saw that their father loved him more than any of his brothers, they hated him so that they could not speak a friendly word to him. Okay. So, y'all, I swear I never have heard it explained this way. But remember, we've been talking about Leon Kass describing the development of each patriarch and then the succession, right? And the whole business of succession, the struggle between Yitzchak and Yishmael, Yaakov and Esav, right? Brother against brother for the succession. And now it's brother against a bunch of other brothers. Leon Kass argues, you ready for this? That this gift of the tunic is not a present because Jacob loves Joseph more. This he gives him because he loves him more. He gives him the mantle of leadership. He designates Joseph the patriarch and gives him a sign and symbol that he will be head of the family, which is the Ketonet Pasim. Wow. Okay. If we read it that way, that certainly changes things, doesn't it? It's not just a sign of favor. If we take it this way, because maybe the brothers took it this way, that Yaakov has designated not only the obnoxious, hated brother to be the patriarch, but the youngest, the very youngest, one of the youngest of a bunch. And we've seen that the rights of progenitor, right, primogenitor, is pretty orthodox in the region, right? So these are subversive texts in the first place. Now imagine you've got a bunch of brothers and one of them who's among the youngest is made the heir apparent. Now that ups the stakes, I think, and makes the story make a little more sense. And makes the brothers not quite as evil as the rabbis sometimes, or we want to make them. Okay? All right, so they hate him by Yisnu Oto, and they couldn't even give him a word of shalom. They couldn't even give him words of greeting. Like, they just hated him that much. Let's go and look at our chart. So Joseph begins as a beautiful, gifted, naive youth, shaped by unearned privilege. His beauty and Jacob's favoritism create a dangerous moral imbalance. Leon Kass sees Joseph as socially unwise, lacking awareness of how others perceive him. Didn't we just talk about Yaakov proving himself in that wrestling match that he's not going to steal it anymore, he's not going to be a trickster anymore, he's not going to manipulate behind the scenes anymore, direct, full-on confrontation with the Ish, and demands his blessing. What does the very next beginning of the patriarchal narrative generation start with? A completely unearned position in the family. Completely unearned. Yaakov has just gone backward, in a sense, from what he learned, right? Out of learning to stand up and demand it and wrestle and struggle and face head on and all of that, he goes completely against that, and with no trial for Joseph to earn his place, grants him the patriarchate. Wow. Okay. Zornberg is talking about trauma and Joseph being formed by trauma, which I found fascinating for us right now in our post-October 7th and Palisades Fire world. Joseph is marked by trauma and overdetermination from the start. His beauty signifies a fragile, fragmented self, overly identified with Jacob's love. Zornberg views Joseph as caught in a family system of unspoken grief and unresolved desire. What are those? The unspoken grief is the death of Rachel. And the unresolved desire, he's calling Jacob's terror. I'm not sure what that means exactly, but making him psychologically exposed. Okay. And she wants to go on. Zornberg goes on to talk about that he's going to now experience an existential shattering. That is how Yosef begins to grow from this, naive, spoiled, kind of objectified in certain ways, young person whose selfhood is at this point unearned, right? He gets this special status and a special coat, but nothing is a result of his effort or his character or his virtues. That's where we start the story. I love starting it from this place. If we read in continuity with the rest of the stories we've been reading, very interesting that we start with this, like that can't be good, right? He's given this status, unearned. We know how bad, Yaakov himself knows how bad that is, right? Okay. Did you have your hand up, Tamara? No? Okay. Maybe yours is mimicking you too. I don't know, but it's very disconcerting. Okay, so let's go on, looking at our text this way. Once, Joseph had a dream, which he told his brothers, and they hated him even more. We're not told what that dream is, okay? He just tells his brothers the dream. Now he comes, and now, so it could be that that's a dream we haven't heard about because they hate him even more, or we're getting an explication of this dream. We don't know. Doesn't matter. He said to them, "Here's a dream which I have dreamed. There we were, binding sheaves in the field, when suddenly my sheaf stood up and remained upright. Then your sheaves gathered around and bowed low to my sheaf." His brothers answered, "Do you mean to reign over us? Do you mean to rule over us?" And they hated him even more for his talk about dreams. He dreamed another dream and told it to his brothers, saying, "Look, I've had another dream. And this time the sun, the moon, and 11 stars were bowing down to me." And when he told it to his fathers and brothers, his father berated him. "What," he said to him, "is this dream you've dreamed? Are we to come, I and your mother and your brothers, and bow low to you to the ground?" So his brothers were wrought up at him, and his father kept the matter in mind. Okay, wait. We're not done. I never saw this before. What does he dream about? He dreams about sheaves of wheat. What do they do for a living? What do they do for a living, these people? Everybody's trying to answer, but everyone's muted. They're shepherds.
They're shepherds. Yeah,
they're shepherds. What is the dream of wheat? That is not a Canaanite dream. Mm-hmm. That is an Egyptian dream. Ooh. Right? He's already Egyptian in certain ways. And hold on to this, because I got very excited. I almost went there this week, but we're not. We're going to go there next. We're going to go there at the beginning of Exodus. Ready? He is a Hebrew who's already kind of Egyptian, who's going to become very Egyptian. How does Moshe start? A Hebrew who's raised as an Egyptian. What? Yeah. All right, here we go. We're going to compare Joseph and Moses as we start Exodus. Oh my gosh. So keep all this in mind as we go into Exodus, because it's unbelievable, the parallels and where they cross and where they diverge. Okay. So he's dreaming dreams that are not about Canaan and their life. He's dreaming sheaves of wheat. That's Egypt. Cass wants to argue, so is the dream about the sun and the moon and the stars. That's not an Israelite dream. That is the heavenly bodies and all that stuff, that's what they worship in Egypt. Ra is the sun god, right? So they're the goddess associated with the moon. Joseph is already dreaming Egyptian dreams. Notice, which I never did before, notice who's interpreting the dreams. Is it Joseph?
It's the father.
The father and the brothers are interpreting the dreams. I never saw that before.
And they're interpreting correctly.
And interpreting correctly. So maybe it's a family talent, right? This ability to interpret dreams and what they might mean in terms of what the future portends. It's not just Joseph who can do it. His father and his brothers do it. Who's not interpreting dreams? Joseph. He's too naive and simple and unformed and privileged and spoiled. He doesn't even interpret his own dreams. Everyone else does. Wow. Okay. So he's the dreamer, but he can't do anything with it because he doesn't have that insight, that ability. Not only doesn't he have the insight to interpret his dreams, he lacks the insight to shut up. He lacks the insight that maybe, these are dreams that maybe my brothers and my father wouldn't love to hear. He's that unaware of anything. He's that shallow. And I'm not using these words as judgments. I'm using them as descriptive because it's important. If we're going to look at his identity development, then it's important that he's so shallow. He has no depth. He can't read the room. Exactly. He can't read anything because because everything's been given him. He hasn't had to be a person. It's all been laid on him, literally. The coat was placed on him. Okay. His beauty was laid on him as an infant, right? As a zygote. He didn't do any of that. It all is put on him. Okay. Yeah, and a tattletale. So he's a tattletale. So he's telling tales on his brothers. And he's prattling on about his dreams with absolutely zero insight into what that might engender in them. He cannot read the room. And to some extent, think about it. He has no empathy, no capacity to put himself in his brother's shoes. None. Okay. Not a good trait for someone who's going to be the leader of the clan and the one to pass on the covenantal, right, relationship.
So how does he become the other Joseph?
Funny you should ask, Bert.
Psychotherapy.
I didn't pay him, people. I promise. All right. Wait, one more thing. Zornberg says, all Joseph is able to do is speak these dreams. He can't understand them. He can't narrate himself. He can only narrate the dream. She's going to focus on his ability to narrate himself into being. That's what his dream interpretation is a symbol of, is his ability to speak himself into being. Who can't speak very well?
Moses, yeah.
Oh my God. Okay. Anyway. All right. So here we go. His brothers, they were jealous of him. And his father kind of kept the matter in mind. Shamar et hadavar. He kind of paid attention to it. One time, like, what if? One time, when his brothers had gone to pasture their father's flock at Shechem, wait, don't read over this, as I have my whole life. What happened in Shechem? What just happened in Shechem at the end of last week's Parsha? Dinah
Was raped.
Or had consensual sex with somebody she really loved, and her brothers went berserk.
Correct. They went berserk in Shechem because it was the prince of Shechem that slept with Dinah. And what did they do in Shechem?
The brothers?
They murdered a bunch of
They
people.
murdered a bunch of
They
people.
murdered
to
everybody, all the
Israel.
men. They murdered all the men. Leon Cass says you cannot read over that. Where are the brothers? In the place of murder. The brothers are hanging out in the place where brothers murdered because of a sibling. And Israel says to Yosef, your brothers are pasturing at Shechem.
Well, also, evidently, Joseph was not hanging out with his brothers.
Correct.
But he was already not included in their murderous rage, and he didn't go to do the flock. So he's already hanging back with daddy.
Or, as the rabbis say, he's studying in the Beis Midrash.
He's studying Talmud.
He's studying Talmud in the Beis Midrash.
That hasn't been written yet.
Exactly. Okay, so Israel knows that the brothers are pasturing in the place where brothers commit murder. These brothers, by the way, committed murder on account of a sibling. And he says, come, I will send you to them.
Duh.
Right? Now, I'm too sorry, but I can't ever read this again the same way. Like, I think Leon Cass is right in setting up how badly Yaakov is parenting and how badly, right, how little self-awareness Yosef has in order to give us a character development. So, and this is Yisrael. Remember, the one who strove with the angel and with God to prove himself and demand a blessing and earn the leadership says, your brothers are at the place where they murdered a bunch of people because of their sister. How about I send you to them?
And Joseph says, Hineni.
And Joseph says,
Hineni.
Right?
Which so many people said when they were ready to go into a whole new area of their lives and relationship to God.
So that when someone says Hineni, dun, 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 right, to Bert's point, when we hear Hineni, we know, okay, something's coming. All right. And
Can you go back over the places where that was really significant? I know when God first spoke to Abraham, Abraham said Hineni, but where, I was trying to remember where else.
Yitzchak, right?
Right, to go and be sacrificed.
Yes. I think it's said doesn't Yaakov say it?
Could be. It doesn't, and Moses eventually says it.
Moses says it for sure.
So it's not just, I'm ready. I think it's I'm ready with a capital R.
Right. So Bert, you have to write down, that's another Joseph Moses, right? Comparison, if they both say Hineni. Okay. Moses, though, is wise enough and insightful enough to be reticent. Yosef is like, okay, you want to send me down to find my brothers who killed all those people on account of our sister? Okay. Right? Like it's just lahavdil. It's the opposite, right, of Moshe. And he said to him, go and see how your brothers are and how the flocks are faring, and bring me back word. So he sent him from the valley of Hebron, and then he's going towards Shechem. Shechema, that hay at the end of Shechem means towards Shechem. A man came upon him. What came upon him? Who found him? An Ish. Bert. An Ish found him. Okay. So when we have an Ish coming up on one of these guys, our patriarchs, we know something about that, don't we? We know this is going to be one of those moments. And the man asked him, "What are you searching for?" And he answered, "I'm looking for my brothers. Can you tell me where they are pasturing?" And the man said, "They've gone from here, for I heard them say, 'Let us go to Dotan.'" So Yosef followed his brothers and found them at Dotan. They see him from afar, and before he even came close to them, they conspired to kill him. And they said to one another, and how's that described? Ish el achiv. A person, an ish, to his brother said. Interesting. So now they're each in the role of being the ish, who's going to change Yosef's destiny. Here comes the dreamer. Come now, let us kill him and throw him into one of the pits. And we can say a savage beast devoured him, and we shall see then what comes of his dreams. But Reuven heard it and tried to save him from their hands. He said, "Let us not take his life." And Reuben went on, "Shed no blood. Cast him into that pit out in the wilderness, but do not touch him yourselves." Now we're being told as an aside by the omniscient author, intending to save him from them and restore him to his father. Okay? When Joseph came up to his brothers, they stripped Joseph of his tunic, the ornamented tunic that he was wearing, took him and cast him into the pit. The pit was empty. There was no water in it. Then they sat down to a meal. Looking up, they saw a caravan of Ishmaelites coming from Gilead, their camels bearing all this stuff. Then Judah said to his brothers, "What do we gain by killing our brother and covering up his blood? Come, let us sell him to the Ishmaelites, but let us not do away with him ourselves. After all, he is our brother, our own flesh." The brothers agreed. When Midianite traders passed by, they pulled Joseph out of the pit. And they sold Joseph for 20 pieces of silver to the Ishmaelites, who brought Joseph to Egypt. Now, I didn't really pay attention to this before. When Reuben returned to the pit and saw that Joseph was not in the pit, he rent his clothes. Returning to his brothers, he said, "The boy, enenu, is no more. Now what am I going to do?" Then they took his tunic, slaughtered a kid, and dipped the tunic in blood. Then they go to the father and they say, "We found this. Please examine it. Is it your son's tunic or not?" He recognized it and said, "My son's tunic. A savage beast devoured him. Joseph was torn by a beast." Yaakov rent his clothes, put sackcloth on his loins, and observed mourning for his son many days. They all tried to comfort him, but he refused to be comforted, saying, "No, I will go down to Sheol mourning for my son." Thus his fathers bewailed him. The Midianites, meanwhile, sold him to Egypt, to Potiphar, a courier of Pharaoh and his prefect. Okay. What are the implications of this that were new for me this year? Some want to argue there's two traditions. The Midianites sold him into slavery, and the brothers sold him to the Ishmaelites. And those two traditions are put together here, and that's why we have this weird, way of it unfolding that doesn't seem to make a lot of sense. But if we look at the way the final redactor puts it together and look closely, really pay attention to the way the words are as we have them, what happens? Reuven suggests throwing him into the pit so that they don't murder him outright, intending to go back later and save him and restore him to his father. Now, how he thinks he's going to get away with that, I am not sure. Like he's just going to show up with Joseph one day and go, "Hi, brothers, look who I found in a pit in the right." So not sure how that's imagined to work, but whatever. So he intends to restore him. He goes to the pit and there's no Joseph. Why? Where's Joseph? The Midianites heard him possibly crying out. I'm sure he's screaming like, "Guys, let me out. You can't do this to me. Don't do this to me." Maybe he's weeping. Maybe he's raging. I don't know. But it would make sense. And the Midianites hear him. They pull him out. Reuven and the brothers don't know this. Reuven goes to the pit and eneno. He is no more. He isn't. He doesn't exist. Eneno. Ain. Ain. There isn't a him. That's literally what the Hebrew means. Eneno. There isn't him. If that's true, Reuven doesn't know what's happened to Joseph. And neither do the brothers. They have no idea what's happened to Joseph. He's just not there. He's gone. Well, do you think they imagined that a bunch of Midianites came by and yanked him out of there? Doubtful. What do they think happened if they don't see him in there? It's likely they actually thought he'd been eaten by something. So what if the brothers are not exactly lying? They don't know what happened to him. I never thought about that before. I've always they lied to their father. Okay, well, what if they're not really lying? They're assuming that's what happened to him. And so they dip his coat in blood just to make it make sure that that's what their father believes. But maybe that's what they believe. Okay, Bert.
So I've always wondered how big the pit was. In other words, are we talking about a 1 foot wide hole that's 5 feet deep or 10 feet deep? Are we talking about 20 feet wide and 100 feet deep? Because it is conceivable that he could have climbed out of there, depending on how big the pit was. So and I've been I don't know what the rabbis said about the size of the pit, but I was always wondering about that, what it looked like. But the other thing to me that was interesting, the way you translated the Hebrew, is that you're saying it's like he evaporated.
Right. Yeah. And
the dog ate my homework. I came back.
He's just got,
and it wasn't there.
Here's my printed copy of what I was showing y'all online.
The dog ate your homework.
Dog ate most of it, a part of it. Go ahead. Okay, so
how big was the pit?
Bor means hole, and why does it say there was no water in it? Because often these were wells, right? It's where when there's heavy rains in the winter, it fills with water. And you would draw water from there. So that's why they have to tell us there's no water in it. Otherwise, he would have drowned. Right? So that says to me, not that I'm an expert on these things, but it says to me it's probably deep and like a shaft, like narrow and deep.
So he's down there and he's going, oh my gosh, all of this happened to me. And what do the brothers do? They don't leave him there. They sit down and they have a meal. And they say, oh, maybe Funny. You can smell some of our food. Isn't it wonderful? They were particularly mean.
Funny, you should bring that up. So Zornberg is going to talk about this traumatic event of being thrown in the pit as a shattering of Joseph's identity that echoes earlier biblical voids, right, from the time of creation, the void of Tohu Vavohu. It represents a descent into psychic dislocation, where Joseph confronts the absence of meaning. The brothers enact a violent erasure of Joseph's emerging voice. To Bert's point, she talks about the fact that he's crying and screaming from the bottom of the pit, and they sit down and have peanut butter and jelly sandwiches. What is that for her? That is them completely erasing his existence, his voice. So remember, she's the one who's going to talk about him articulating himself into being, his identity into being. He's just saying the dreams. He's not interpreting them. He's just saying them. Then he's calling from the pit, and they ignore him. They don't hear him. He's not seen and he's not heard. Wow. Okay. The pit is Joseph's first real education, says Cass. Stripped of his coat, Joseph loses the illusions of privilege and begins a long, painful maturation. The brothers are not villains, but men acting within a flawed honor code. Okay, I'm not sure I agree with Cass on that. I mean, I think it's pretty clear that, it's not great what they do. But he also argues that everything that's defined Joseph to this point is taken away. All the things that were put on him are taken away. His status, his coat, his beauty, because you can't see somebody at the bottom of a pit, his voice, everything is taken away. And now begins his true exploration and development of an identity, one that has not been inherited. He inherited his beauty, and if the way we've seen everybody else in the family interpret his dreams, maybe he inherited the talent for interpreting dreams, right? He's inherited everything he's had. He's been given everything till this moment. This moment is the moment of radical trauma that dislocates Joseph and destabilizes him in every way. This, claims Zornberg, is how he will earn his place as the one to pass on the covenantal relationship. Only through destabilization and the complete coming apart of his narrative as he's understood it till now. And that's going to happen again. Every time Yosef moves to a new stage of development, it is the result of radical dislocation. And I have to say, I am appreciative of that this year in a way I haven't been before. I really am. Like, thinking about the story we tell ourselves, I think I told y'all that, trauma as defined by the science of post-traumatic growth, trauma is defined as a challenge to the core narrative that we have about the world and how it works, about the world and our place in it. If it doesn't do that, it's not trauma. It's just something bad that happened. Resilience can handle that. Post-traumatic growth talks about resilience doesn't happen with trauma because you're not going back to the place you were. That's resilience. You bounce back. We even use that language. You bounce back. Back to what? Back to who you were before the horrible thing happened. That's not post-traumatic growth. Joseph is going to experience PTG because he's having a radical undoing of his understanding of how the world works and what his place in it is. That is the definition of trauma, according to PTG science. And he's now going to have to build a new understanding of self and his place in the world. I so get that in so many ways after this fire and losing everything I built. Not everything, obviously, like everything material that I had built in 60 years or inherited, all of that is gone. My place in the world, gone. In terms of physical, right? Physical location, gone. And the trauma for me was, okay, if you work hard and you keep your shoulder to the grindstone and you're trying to do good in the world and you don't let your foot off the pedal, you're rewarded with material success. If you're not risking stocks and whatever, if you're just working hard and trying hard and being a good person at what you're doing, and you just keep working and you keep succeeding at this step and this step and this step, then you win, respect, material comfort of some sort, some kind of stability, and the ability in your older years to kind of relax. Okay, well, we saw what happened when Jacob tried to relax and settle down, right? What's going to happen? The minute we're told he wants to settle, right? You turn 60, you're looking towards, the end of your career, you're going to get to, your kid is launched. What's going to happen? Your house is going to burn down. Right? So this radical challenge to that. It's not true that if you do all that, you're going to be okay. And forget disease. That's been a factor of mine since I've been in the rabbinate for 30 years. I'm always expecting that phone call that it's stage 4 and inoperable. But aside from that, it's just random, massive dislocation and destruction. There is a way that we can address trauma, this radical dislocation and destabilization that allows us to grow. And that's post-traumatic growth. And that is exactly what Torah is describing with Yosef. All right, Rachel.
Thank you. Actually, so what you just said did make me connect those two last comparisons that you made between Zornberg and Cass. I know that you said that you didn't like what Cass said about the episode, about that last little part of the episode, but didn't we talk about something about honor code societies? Mm-hmm. And how they focus a lot on external factors and external values. And so when we start the whole passage and Jacob seems to have regressed a bit, he's taken some steps backward. Is this because also in part we are seeing how the ancient Israelites they still haven't quite gotten it, that we have to move away from a culture that focuses on honor code and those kinds of external, values, and move towards something that's more about the inner world and, are we acting in a way that is aligned with values that are meaningful? And so in that sense, this is an extremely traumatic event for him because he's stripped of his coat, which is the external symbol of everything that is of value. And it's done to him in just that little cast description because the brothers have been shamed by him.
Oh, love it. Love it. Because when we talked about the shame culture, right, we talked about it being visual. Right. And all the descriptions of Joseph to this point are really visual.
Right.
He's beautiful. And he is wearing this beautiful coat. The visual representation of his status as Yaakov understands it. The brothers don't see him as being, the leader. I love that. And that they murdered everyone in Shechem out of an honor code of revenge for Dinah being defiled, whether it was consensual or not. She doesn't get to agree, right? Her sexuality doesn't belong to her. And I love that. So that Torah is telling us, here's the proof that they are not the ones to be the leaders, because they're stuck in that whole shame, based whatever. And Yosef isn't either, but he's gonna be.
He will be he'll come out of the trauma.
But it's going to take trauma to change him from the same kind of, vain, whatever, to it's going to be the radical destabilization that's going to enable him to open, to let I think it was Cass who said for there to be cracks for new things in him to start emerging. That shell, had to be broken so that he starts to have parts of him emerge. And it's going to happen again when he's thrown into prison, right? Everything he knew in Potiphar's house, everything he achieved in Potiphar's house is radical destabilization again. It's all taken away. Again, status that he earned. He earned that status this time, and it's taken away. So even with his growth, even with his starting to mature and take some responsibility, he doesn't sleep with her. He's got a moral. He's starting to develop a moral compass. He's loyal to his boss, and it's all taken away anyway. Again, trauma, like undeserved, unearned, radical destabilization of self and his place in the world. Okay, Susan, you had your hand up?
It's just that if you look at how many people are here, what one could have said, like if temple burns down, there's not going to be a KI. And KI has come through its own post-traumatic shock to be even stronger. And I think the whole Jewish community has, because I've never seen outside shuls react the way they do now, inviting us, joining us, celebrating.
Nice. That it's always, but it's always a choice whether or not we're going to do that. All y'all could have thrown up your hands and said, the project's over. You could have. You didn't. That's a choice. And I think that's going to be a pivotal moment. We won't know what it means until some time from now. But I think you're right. I think it's one of these Joseph moments, this radical destabilization of who we understood ourselves to be, what our relationship to the rest of the wider community is and was, which I spoke about at the High Holidays, that those walls have literally burned down, that we now have an opportunity to figure out, what do we want our Palisades faith community to look like? It doesn't have to look like it did before, right? It could look different. Yeah, I think so. This is the opportunity for us to figure out, okay, so we do, I think, is what you're saying. We do want this to be a moment of post-traumatic growth. And so what do we need to do to make sure that we're approaching this devastation, continue to approach it in a way that helps us, like Yosef, articulate a new identity and discover a new identity. And it's only through those radical destabilizations, points out Zernberg, that Yosef is able then to interpret other people's dreams. It's only when he is in Egypt and when he's in prison that he's able to understand, empathize, and articulate and interpret and narrate other people's experience. So, yeah, there's a lot there for us to hold as we go forward into the rest of the Joseph story. But this idea that we develop an ability to interpret and to hear other people and their stories and what it might mean for them differently when our own world has been blown up. And that's very, very hopeful for me. Like, that is a very hopeful message about this story for us in this particular crazy moment we find ourselves in. Lisa?
I'm just wondering, is there anything in this story that suggests the idea of a community like we have around us, or other people reacting to our trauma? Anybody around Joseph responding to this entire story? I mean, is that part of the story in any way? No.
What we have is Pharaoh recognizing Joseph's developed ability to read other people's experiences. And Joseph has learned through hard work in Potiphar's house, how to do now what Egypt is going to need from him. But he remains very much alone.
Yeah.
I get the sense he's very much alone. He hides from his brothers. He weeps in private. We don't hear anything about Osnat, his wife, really. It's just like, I don't know. I just get the sense that Joseph remains kind of a lonely figure, a crossover figure, like Moshe.
Mm-hmm.
Moshe, he's going to be surrounded by people, as is Yosef, but you get the sense that he's carrying so much alone.
Yeah. Thanks.
Betsy or Dave, I'm not sure which one of you has the hand raised.
Me. It seems like the post-trauma is, for many of us and for Joseph, it's sort of an opportunity for reinvention of the self. Because I know a lot of us have, like, this is a new chapter, or that's the way we're looking at it. And so we're starting fresh and we have a different perspective about things like Joseph. And I mean, for me, I was looking at all the silver linings from the trauma that we've all suffered. And it makes you look at other, as you were saying, Amy, it makes you look at maybe humanity in general or other people in a different way, because I think that this trauma brought out the best in humanity, personally. And so that's kind of the way we're looking at it.
And everyone who would envision, remaining in their lovely little place in the Palisades that are now having a huge party in Playa Vista and a perfectly happy in Playa Vista. Right? So, like, would that have been something you could possibly have imagined?
No.
That you would leave the Palisades and all move together to Playa Vista and hang out together and go every Monday to happy hour and, like, it's not something, like, it just, yes, I think you're right that this is a very old text about what is true, and what wise cultures know is true is that some growth only happens as a result of radical destabilization. And that is very encouraging to me, that truth is as thousands of years old, and it is right there in our tradition, right there. Alex?
So what was interesting to what you said about Joseph and the loneliness, and I hope that we can at some point explore that further, just that connection of leadership, loneliness, and the push and pull of community versus that loneliness. Even when you're in community, if you're a leader, feeling some sort of loneliness there.
Thank you, Alex. So we're going to continue looking at this last of the patriarchal narratives through this idea of the expansion of each generation and its challenges and its own way of becoming the one who passes on the covenant. What I find fascinating with the Yosef narrative is that he's not the one that, like, really takes over the family covenant business and runs it. Like, all the other stories have been taking over the covenant business from the parents and running it. He's running Egypt. It's very interesting, right? He's running Egypt to pass it through to the next generation, but it's the last we're going to hear of a patriarch. It ends with the Joseph story, right? It's not patriarchs anymore that we're going to hear about. We get 400 years with no mention of a patriarch because we're subjected to Egyptian slavery. So the whole clan and its sovereignty is gone at the end of the Joseph story. So look forward to continuing as we move into Hanukkah. And there's a very popular musical about Yosef, right? So it continues to resonate. This myth continues to resonate for us. May it continue to inspire us and strengthen us to make out of what's given to us as trauma and tragedy something new and beautiful and courageous. Shabbat Shalom.
You've been listening to Rabbi Amy Bernstein's Friday Morning Torah Study from Kehillat Israel in Pacific Palisades, California. For more information, go to our website, www.ourki.org.